episode. Today we are going to complete what we started last time. We started speaking about the classification of living organisms or taxonomy. We studied an introduction about the taxonomy, and we said that living organisms are huge in number on the earth, so scientists try to classify them into groups in order to facilitate the study and dealing with each other, with each of them. We started by speaking about the attempts of classification or trials of classification of these organisms. And we mentioned that 2,300 years ago, Aristotle put the first trial of classification. He classified the organisms into animals and plants. The animals could be classified into red-blooded and bloodless. Plants could be classified into trees, shrubs, and weeds. So as you see, these classification attempts were not depending on scientific principles, because the color of the blood is not a scientific principle to classify all animals. Also, the height of the plants or the size of the plant is not a scientific principle to classify the plants. In 1700 or 1700 years, Carlos Linnaeus started to establish a new system of classification. He classified the organisms into animal kingdom and plant kingdom, and he invented the definition of the species, which is the group of individuals having similar characteristics and can interbreed among each other to produce new fertile organisms. He also gave us the dichotomous key, and we still use this key up till now in classifying the organisms, as you see here. He classified told us about how to classify a big group like insects into two groups and other two groups and so on. So the dichotomous key classifies the insect into smaller groups depending on, for example, like the wings, the number of wings. So the insects could be classified into two groups, wingless and winged. And the winged insects could be also classified into smaller groups depending on the shape or the number of wings. Again, classified into the length of the legs or the scales found in the wings. So in each time we focus into smaller groups until we end up with the name of the individual. Also, Carlos Linnaeus gave us the definition of the species, as we said, and gave us a way to give names for the individuals or the species. He invented the binomial nomenclature system, which give the names of the living organisms or the species with two names. The first name refers to the genus, and the second name refers to the species. Like this example, Felis domesticus, which is the cat, has the first name Felis, refers to the genus, and the domesticus refers to the species. And the hierarchy of classification started with the kingdom and phylum and so on, as we said last time, until we end up with the species. In 1969, Robert Whitaker was the scientist who established a new system of living organisms classification, and he classified them into 5 kingdoms. And we call this system is the modern system of classification. And this is what we are going to study in details. The 5 kingdoms are Monera, Protista, Fungi, Planta, and Animalia. All of these kingdoms include all the living organisms on the earth. After Whitaker, other scientists tried to find another system of classification that classify the organisms into 6 or 7 kingdoms, and this is not agreed all over the world, but all people all over the world agrees with the 5 kingdom system. Let's start by the first kingdom. The first kingdom is Kingdom Monera. Monera is the simplest form of life and includes all types of bacteria, which is the first creatures on the earth and widely spread in all environments that you can imagine, and include a huge number of organisms. These bacteria can be classified into 2 phyla. The first phylum is Archaebacteria, which is more primitive, and Eubacteria, or true bacteria, which is more developed. Let's start by phylum Archaebacteria. The Archaebacteria includes all types of bacteria that can survive in harsh environmental conditions. And these harsh environmental conditions like hot springs, highly salty water, environments with no oxygen or shortage of oxygen. As you see in these pictures, the hot spring, contains the type of Archaebacteria that is colored in yellow or orange color, and this bacteria can survive in temperature reaches to hundreds, so it can survive in this harsh environment. Also, highly salted water, like water in small seas or the seas with a high salty water, we can find the bacteria that is colored in red. So Archaebacteria is the type of bacteria that can live in this hard environment or harsh environment and difficult conditions. This group of Archaebacteria or this bacteria differs from the true bacteria or Eubacteria in the structure of both cell membrane and the cell wall. Of course, this is simpler than the true bacteria. The other phylum is called phylum Eubacteria, or we call it true bacteria. And this true bacteria can live in different places, different environments, having different modes of life. We can classify them into 2 main groups, autotrophic bacteria and heterotrophic bacteria. The autotrophic bacteria that can synthesize the food by themselves, can make their own food by themselves. We have an example of autotrophic bacteria, cyanobacteria, and the example is nostoc, and we are going to see it or study it in details. And also there are other types of autotrophic bacteria that can synthesize their food by obtaining energy from chemical reactions. So it could be autotrophic, phototrophic, or chemotrophic. And the heterotrophic bacteria, they depend on others to obtain food. These others could be living organisms, so they become parasites, or dead dead organisms or organic remains, so they are saprophytes. Let's start by the eubacteria and the autotrophic ones. As we said, that this type of bacteria are widely spread, that exist everywhere. Everywhere means in water, in sand, in air, and some of them can live on living organisms' bodies or inside them, inside the organisms' bodies. Like the human body contains many types of bacteria that can live. Some of them are useful and others are harmful for the body, so they live everywhere. Some are autotrophic, as we said, like this type, which is nostoc, cyanobacteria, example is nostoc, while others are heterotrophic, as we said. And please, my dear students, notice that this nostoc bacteria is not multicellular, but it is unicellular. But what you see here is gathering the cells near each other. So they like to line up like this, like beads. So each one of them is independent. It can live alone, but in this shape or in this organism, they like to stay adhering to each other. So bacteria generally are unicellular organisms. As we said, that organisms, bacteria can be autotrophic or heterotrophic. The heterotrophic bacteria could be parasites, cause diseases, or saprophytes, feed on dead bodies or organic remains. Bacteria reproduce asexually, as you see here in this picture, asexually by binary fission. One cell divides into two cells simply. And the eubacteria is more developed than the archaebacteria. Also, these bacteria can be found in different shapes. So they vary in shapes like spherical shape, and the scientific name is cocci, rod-shaped bacilli, or spiral-shaped spirali or spirilla. So these types or these shapes of bacteria also can be used to classify bacteria. So what we have said about Kingdom Monera are including two phyla. One of them is Archaeobacteria and the other one is Eubacteria. The Archaeobacteria includes simpler form of bacteria and they live in harsh environment. The Eubacteria live everywhere, and all types of bacteria, Archaeobacteria or Eubacteria, are unicellular organisms. They represent the simplest form of life and widely spread and can be divided into different shapes or different modes of life, autotrophic or heterotrophic, and so on. We move to the other kingdom, Kingdom Protesta. Kingdom Protesta also include living organisms of unicellular body. So all of them are unicellular, but more developed than the bacteria. If you could notice, if you go back to this picture, you can notice that bacteria has no structures inside the cell. Only one chromosome is spread in the cytoplasm. So you cannot find the nucleus. Also, you cannot find organelles. So the simplest form includes just cell wall and cell membrane, and what's inside the cytoplasm? No membrane bounded organelles. No, for example, Golgi body or endoplasmic reticulum or any other organelles as you studied in the first term, but only the hereditary material which is represented by one chromosome present freely in the cytoplasm. But what about the kingdom Protista? In kingdom Protista, we find the organisms are more developed than the Monera organisms. So kingdom Protista includes many phyla. The first one is protozoa, and the word protozoa means proto means primitive, zoa is the animals. So protozoa refers to the primitive animals or the simplest form of animals. And what characterizes animals is the movement. It is obvious in animals than in other organisms. So all of them can move. This is why we use this item, the movement, to differentiate between all types of protozoan animals or protozoan organisms. The other phylum is called Euglenophyta. The third one is Chrysophyta, and the last one is Pyrophyta. Let us start with the first phylum, which is Protozoa. The protozoan organisms include classes, and the first class that we are going to study now is Sarcodina. The Sarcodina includes all types of amoeba. Did you hear about this organism before? Maybe. So amoeba is unicellular organism, but if you notice, the picture shows the structure of the amoebal cell. Amoebal cell contains, includes the cytoplasm, which is a gelatinous mass surrounded by membrane, and there is a nucleus that was not found in bacteria. So this organism is more developed than bacterial cell. So there is a nucleus and the other organelles in the cell inside the amoeba. What characterizes amoeba is it can move by what we call pseudopodia. The pseudopodia are false feet. As you see in the video, the amoeba moves to surround and engulf the prey. So it is a predator. It moves, it pushes the cytoplasm surrounding the cell of another smaller organism and obtains it in food vacuole inside it. But this movement is not using fixed legs, but we call them false legs or pseudopodia. Very amazing. Some of amoeba are parasites, or others can be free living. Okay. Another class called Celiophora. So phylum Protozoa includes also Celiophora. Celiophora means the organism which is surrounded by cilia. And this organism uses cilia to move. So in amoeba, the movement was by pseudopodia, and in this organism, which is called paramecium, the movement is by cilia. The structure of paramecium, it's slipper shaped, as you see, and it has two nuclei. One is a small micronucleus and one is large macronucleus, and it has oral groove through which food comes inside the paramecium. And the cilia is surrounding this body and be used to movement. Notice the movement of paramecium. Could you notice the cilia moving in waves to transfer from one place to another? The third class in protozoa is flagellata. Flagellata includes organisms with flagellum, and we have an example called trypanosoma. Trypanosoma is a parasite, and this parasite causes diseases, causes malaria disease. It causes sleep disease. Trypanosoma is a parasite, parasitizes on man, spending part of its life cycle, and the other part is present in fly called tsetse, and when it infects a human body, it causes the sleep disease. Could you notice the movement by using the flagellum? So this is called flagellata, and the example is trypanosoma. The other class is called sporozoa. Sporozoa means the spores, and also when we mention the word spore, that means it is a parasite. So this organism is a parasite called Plasmodium. So this example is called Plasmodium, which causes malaria disease. And this parasite spends also part of its life cycle inside the human body, infecting the red blood cells, as you see in the video. So the parasite in blue color infects the red blood cell and reproduce inside it to produce a huge number of another stage of parasitism and cause malaria symptoms. So Plasmodium causes malaria disease. So as you notice, my dear students, that the protozoan animals are primitive animals. All of them are unicellular. Some of them live freely and others are parasites, but all of them unicellular, containing structures more developed than the last phylum, which is, the last kingdom, which is Monera. So Protista is containing or including more developed organisms than Monera. The other phylum in in Protista is Euglenophyta, and as you see here, the Euglena. Euglena includes two types of characteristics. Some of them referring to plants or like plants, and others like animals. And as you see, there is eye spot like animals, flagellum for movement like animals, but chloroplasts like plants. And this is the big nucleus present inside the organism. My dear students, next time, inshallah, we are going to complete what we need to study about Kingdom Protista and the other kingdoms. Until we meet again, goodbye.